Welcome to Youth Ministry Unscripted, where we talk real, honest, and raw about gospel-centered youth ministry. I'm one of your co-hosts, Josh Hussung. I'm here with Isaiah and Danny. Say hi, guys.
Praise the Lord. How y'all doing?
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so glad to be back with you again. And got a fun topic for you. This is one that I feel like is frequently on my mind, and has been the whole time that I've been in youth ministry. That has to do with volunteers. I think volunteers are important, but let's just start with that for a second. Isaiah and Danny, why? Let's say you got to convince a younger youth pastor, new in, and not even in a huge youth group or anything like that, just a normal amount of kids. Why might they need to consider recruiting volunteers for their youth ministry?
You know, as a young youth worker, I used to do everything. You know, our youth group was a little smaller at the time. And so I could kind of do everything. My energy level also, and the way I did worked, and maybe my sinful controlling nature. But over the last, I was at my church for 29 years, but probably the last 15 years, you just realize that the volunteers are the real backbone of the ministry. They're the foundation, and, kind of working with them and delegating, and your reach to students is so much more. You can only do it through other volunteers and having people serve with you together. You can't do it all yourself. And for me, it was just a matter of human resources, and just me trying to do it by myself was impossible. Or, even having my wife, who's a PK, pastor's kid, and she liked ministry, but, just trying to put everything on her and I was also not really healthy for our marriage and things like that. And you realize that, man, them kind of ministering to the kids, and leading small groups, and doing even relational ministry, it just makes your ministry more effective and powerful to the students. And, I'm not God. I used to think I was, I guess, even though I probably didn't really think it. But yeah, I just realized, man, I need them.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to have an effective, ministry, volunteers are important. Even when you think about just the role of the church to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry, and the Lord has burdened and placed different desires, different, unique talents in the hearts of his people. And he has called some within the church body to minister to the young people. And so you're inviting those volunteers into the work that God is doing within that ministry. And if we want to engage in effective relational discipleship, then we have to multiply ourselves, because we cannot effectively disciple every single student within the ministry. And so that's why we need to invite, it becomes much more important that we invite volunteers in, who love the Lord, who love serving students, and will disciple young people.
And I think what Isaiah said, like each person's unique gifts and talents, like, I realized that, like, a volunteer who's like, like not a pastor, like I had a volunteer with me for 20 years who was a lawyer, and, some kids who wanted to go into law in the future really resonated with this, volunteer, and, his unique background and gifting, and he was actually also a former youth group student, which actually really helped him, really relate to the students. And
Yep.
he would tell all these bad stories about me as a young youth pastor, which I think the students enjoyed. But, like, yeah, what Isaiah said, that the uniqueness and giftedness of each volunteer, in the diverse body of Christ, made these volunteers so powerful and effective, more than I could just be as a pastor at many times.
For sure.
Yeah, I think when it assumes at least somewhat of an attitude of humility that says, like, I either can't do it all, so you might have a bigger youth group where you literally cannot know all the kids. You might have a small youth group, but just because you can know all the kids doesn't mean that you can quite be there for all the kids. For example, like as men involved in youth ministry, there's a degree to which we can get to know the guys in our youth group, and they may feel comfortable to share certain things, and that would be appropriate. There is a certain level of knowledge of the girls in your youth ministry that would be inappropriate, and it would be better for you to have at least a one female volunteer who could be there for them in a way that it would not be possible for you to. And sometimes that might fall to your spouse, but that can sometimes get a little tricky, like you said, Danny. Like some smaller churches, I feel like the expectation for the pastor's wife or the youth minister's wife is that they will be just as involved in everything as you. Now, I think the church that I'm at has what I would consider a slightly healthier view. That is, my wife is free to volunteer in our youth ministry if she chooses, but if she's not in a place where she can't, no one's going to guilt her out about it. But having someone, whoever that is, there for certain students. And then there are just some things, like, I know for me, I'm a music and movies kind of guy. Like that's where my interests are. If guys start talking about sports, like, I'll go to a football game and I understand what's going on and I enjoy it. But if you start talking to me about teams and stats and coaches and the drama of all that stuff, like, I'm gonna feign interest to try to build a relationship, but I'm not gonna be knowledgeable about it. And there's some guys in that demographic in our youth group that they're just probably not gonna connect well with me because we don't have that common ground. And so I've got volunteers who are just gonna be able to be conversant about those things and build a relationship in a way that they might think that I'm trying real hard and they appreciate that, but it's just not gonna be quite the same. And you got more people that can kind of cover the ground and connect relationally with students. So it's important. I think hopefully we've sold you at least a little bit that you need at least a volunteer or two. Could be really helpful for you to have a partner in your ministry, even if it's not a full team. So hopefully that helps us think. Now, what kind of roles? So just give us the flyover in your youth ministry context. What are the main couple of roles that volunteers fill? What do they do in your youth ministry? Obviously, like, we might have a long list of various different things you might have people do, but the big one or two roles, what are those?
So for me, was those small group leaders. That was a more consistent role. Very, it requires more of their time to be there. And then we had like Sunday morning teachers. So those who will come in and who will help teach, and we will be on a teaching rotation on Sunday mornings. And so I would typically try not to ask those who teach on Sunday mornings to come on Wednesdays. So those were like the two primary roles that we have, among others.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all those roles are important, even like some of the, like in my youth group, parents who shop for food and I really tried to use, I borrowed this from some other organization, so this is not my own clever terminology, but this idea of going from chaperones to being shepherds. I really like the alliteration, even though it's not the same letter, but even parents who are coming just to quote unquote chaperone or buy food or everything. I told them that, and volunteers who were small group leaders like Isaiah's group or Sunday Bible study teachers, that they're not just there to watch over kids, but they're there to, in some way, shepherd kids in different degrees. But I really like that alliteration of from chaperones to shepherds. And
I like that.
That's not my clever. I like to take credit for it, but I used it a lot over the years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think my volunteer roles are very similar to what Isaiah said. small group leaders are very helpful, and they can kind of oversee a group of students. Sunday school teachers are very important. Obviously, there's other ways, literally like chaperones at retreats and things. But I think encouraging the attitude that we're not just warm bodies in the room, we're not just there to have a presence, we're there to actually invest in the lives of students. That's really important.
Wading into youth ministry can be overwhelming. It's more overwhelming if you don't have someone to lean on and learn from. The Rooted Youth Ministry Mentorship Program was created for youth pastors in precisely this situation. The program is designed to provide both small group and individual coaching for youth ministers who are in their first 3 years of youth ministry, or youth ministers who are transitioning to a gospel-centered approach. This program is 1 year, wherein small groups of 4 to 6 youth ministers are led by one mentor in both a cohort and an individual setting through a carefully crafted 12-month curriculum designed to help you grow spiritually as an individual and as a youth minister. This comprehensive curriculum, designed by and for youth ministers, cover all facets of youth ministry, from Bible teaching, relational discipleship, equipping and training volunteers, missions, retreats, and crisis management. At the end of the program, we expect you'll be more proficient in teaching the Bible to students. You'll feel more comfortable partnering with parents, and you'll be better equipped to handle crisis situations, among other things. Additionally, when you complete the program, you'll receive a Rooted Youth Ministry certificate to affirm your commitment to join God in the work that He is doing in the lives of the students you serve.
So here's the thing that I'm imagining someone who is newer to youth ministry. I'm imagining someone who doesn't have a volunteer team, or they've got a volunteer team and there are now holes in the team, and they're constantly having someone drop out of the team, like even mid-year, and then they find themselves kind of desperately looking for a replacement for that person, or having to just go without. So what practices would you recommend in terms of that would contribute towards, let's start with the recruitment of volunteers. What practices would you adopt that would set someone up well when they're recruiting volunteers?
One of the things that works for me is when I think about recruiting volunteers, I like to just kind of tap folks on the shoulders and meet with them in person. And so have coffee with somebody. It's where I could share the vision, the mission, ways in which they could come in to serve. But most importantly, just kind of get to know them and kind of see if their desire to serve, if they have a desire to serve. Then that opens opportunities. Once I hear about them, once I hear their heart, then it allows me to know, okay, hey, these are ways in which you can partner with the Lord and what He's doing. How's that sound to you? And so, most effective way, I mean, we can do the church bulletins, the announcements, on Sunday mornings. But I think what has worked for me is actually the person-to-person interaction and getting to know folks, sitting down with them and communicating about the ministry. So,
and I was going to add to that, Isaiah, when you said that, I don't think the church bulletin or the announcement on Sunday works too well or works at all. You can, maybe God will bring you a volunteer through that, and somebody will come to you and say they want to volunteer. But I think, like Isaiah said, the personal relationships. One thing I like to do is, we were at a little bit of a bigger church where we had, a senior pastor and a few other pastors, but make them aware, or make my volunteers aware, hey, that we're looking for volunteers. And if you have any suggestions, please let me know. Like, don't go talk to somebody randomly first, just because, I want to maybe just kind of vet them a little bit and find out a little bit more. But, if you have any, just let my fellow staff members or volunteers know, hey, we're looking out for someone and or volunteer or two. And if you have any suggestions, please point them my way. And, I could maybe observe or, like Isaiah said, have some coffee with them and just get to know them and talk to them. But I think that's been very helpful to let other people in my circles at church, my volunteers or other pastors know that I'm looking, and if they have any ideas to, let me know, and I could kind of, try to get to know the person in my way and vet them in my informal way.
Okay, I think that's all really helpful. So, with the Sunday morning announcement, I think the potential difficulty is that someone could come and tell you that they're interested in being involved in youth ministry, but what if they're not the person that you would have wanted or that you think is gifted in this area? Then you've got an awkward thing where you've now opened it up to just like, I need somebody help. And then finally somebody comes to help. And then you're like, between nobody and you, I guess I'll take nobody. That seems kind of hurtful. So I think the kind of by word of mouth is helpful. And I really like, Isaiah, what you said also, the kind of, I forget, this is some from some movie about sales or something, but somebody's saying always be closing.
Yeah.
I think always be recruiting. And what you can be doing is anytime you meet someone who you think could be good for student ministry, you say, hey, have you ever thought about this? And you just start it with, I don't actually have any needs right now. Because another thing that does is if I walk up to someone and I say, oh my gosh, I have lost a small group leader. I really need a seventh grade. Well, you might get somebody who doesn't feel called to this, and not that you have to have some really deep sense of call to work in the youth ministry, but they're not interested in it really. They don't feel like they're gifted for it, but they love you and they want to help you. Well, that's great if that's what you've got to have, but that's a little different than asking someone when there is zero pressure what they would want to do. And if you ask them with zero pressure, that helps you gauge what their real interest in it, and it helps you kind of create a list of possible people that you could come back to later. And so if you're always recruiting, even if you don't have a spot for them, then you're saying, hey, you know what? If I ever have needs, is this something you'd ever potentially be interested in? And then you can leave it with, if I have one, I'll come back to you at some point. Or if you're really feeling a strong sense from the Lord about it, let's talk about it more. And that way you've kind of initiated it. It's sort of out there. You've got their name for future reference. And that way you're accumulating this. And I think, Danny, exactly what you said, utilizing your current volunteers because they know what the work is.
Yep.
And they know people in a similar place in life, maybe a similar place of availability. And they can also sell it for you. See, like sometimes what I'll do is if I know somebody knows another person they think would be great, and I know that they would be good for it, I say, why don't you say something to them about it and see what they say? Because they're a volunteer, so they have a different perspective than we would.
Yeah.
We're trying to fill a spot. They're visionary for something that they're experiencing right now. So I think your volunteers probably are your best recruiters for volunteers, as long as they understand the parameters you're looking for. So always be recruiting. I think that's really important for us to understand. Another thing, piece with that, okay? So we don't want to find ourselves like suddenly in a need, so always be recruiting. So that means like far out in advance. You know, if your new school year stuff is happening in August and you need to train people and have them ready in August, be recruiting in January. You know, like be talking to people, because that's the other thing is people are scheduling out their year. They're accepting volunteer positions for adult related things. They're doing they're scheduling stuff out. And if you don't ask them until late July, early August, they might have been willing to, and they might have been excited about it, but they might be saying yes to other things because they don't think that there's any other stuff there. So the recruitment is important. Let's talk about retention. A part of the problem that we can run into sometimes is you have volunteers who just drop off the map before they were supposed to. So what practices would you recommend a younger student minister to adopt that would contribute towards a better retention of volunteers over time? What do you think?
Yeah.
So I don't know if this answers directly, but one of the things that I used to try to be intentional about doing that was helpful was I would have at least 2 adult volunteers per group That way, if we do lose someone, we still have an adult within that group. Or if one need to be out during a certain time, and so they can coordinate, that we have at least one of them that's present with that group. And so that I think that would be an effective way in terms of ensuring that you have guardrails in place in the event that you do lose someone when you're not, when you wasn't expecting it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And, I think having some kind of regular follow up or accountability with them. And accountability is sometimes can be a negative word, but I try to have a volunteer meeting once a month. I try to text them and let them know I'm praying for them and, kind of shepherding them to not only in that they're being a good volunteer, but I'm caring for them spiritually and as a person and things like that. And so there is some kind of regular communication and care and shepherding of them that I do try to do. And if that also means like, I'll text him a youth ministry article, or in our volunteer training once a month, we'll do some kind of reading. And at the same time, I'm not going to like overburden them with a 3-hour lecture or something like that.
Right.
But, but I do try to keep some regular accountability with them that's not overkill, but at the same time, and it's also not just it's also a care for them, that I'm caring for them as people and not just because they're my volunteers.
Yeah. Those are the two words that I would use: care and connection. I think those two are very, very important, because we want to feel cared for. And I think what happens is when those unexpected things happen where one kind of drops off, is a lot of times is because we weren't in communication with them. Because typically they'll let you know, when something is going on, and not in every case, but I think communication is very important. Those monthly meetings that you talked about, Danny, we used to have them every other month.
Yeah.
But weekly, I'm communicating,
Yeah.
and I'm texting periodically, because I want my ministry, the ministry that the Lord is calling me to, is not just for those young people, but it's also for those volunteers that's coming alongside of me. And so I want to make sure that I'm caring for them and I'm connecting with them.
We are so excited to share that we have a new opportunity for folks working in family ministry: the Rooted Family Ministry Mentorship Program. It provides both small group and individual coaching for volunteers, youth pastors, or associate pastors who oversee family ministry in their church context. This 12-month program includes small groups of 6 to 8 led by one mentor in both a cohort and an individual setting, through a carefully crafted curriculum designed to help you grow spiritually as an individual and as a leader in your congregation. At the end of the program, we expect you'll be prepared to equip the volunteers and parents in your congregation to disciple the next generation to know and love Jesus. Additionally, when you complete the program, you'll receive a Rooted Family Ministry certificate to affirm your commitment to join God in the work He is doing in the lives of the families you serve.
So in the timeline continuum of volunteering, what y'all are talking about is sort of in the present tense, like the ongoing work of the ministry, that there's a constant connection, there's a sense of care and encouragement towards your leaders. I don't know, I can't remember if you guys said kind of celebrating the wins as they come along, but I think that's another point of it. Like when you're having those meetings, saying, man, loving how you're doing this, loving how I'm seeing your students connect. Asking for some success stories, helping them share the hardships and offer help in the middle of that. One other thing I would add that I think helps with retention is more on the beginning end of that timeline, and that is clarity about what the volunteers are being asked to do. I would say for me, the most common mid-year, outside of, there are things that people can't help, right? They get a new job, they have to move away, they get married, they have a baby, those kinds of things. But most of the time when I've lost volunteers at the wrong time, like in the middle of the year, it's because they weren't clear on what they were supposed to be doing, or what was considered successful. And so one would be like, if I just have somebody who's just kind of in the room and they don't really know what they're supposed to be doing, they're going to feel, and then I don't actually ever give them anything really to do, and they're just kind of left to sort of like, quote, be relational, and I'm not helping them in any way, then they're going to get discouraged, and eventually they're going to stop coming. And because I wasn't utilizing them, I'm not going to really remember that they're not there all the time. And then it's just, they're going to feel insulted because I didn't even notice that they stopped coming, and then it's just going to be bad, right? That's a bad thing. Or if I have stereotypical, let's say middle school boys, 6th grade boys, small group leader, right? If that guy comes in there and he's expecting to have long, deep, serious, intent conversation about theological issues, then he is not understanding the expectations for this age group. Like students that in 6th grade can understand and have a relationship with the Lord. They can understand deep theological concepts, but they're not really designed, and their brain is not built to have like long, calm conversations for like an hour at a time. And so if a guy comes into a middle school boys small group expecting to have that, when he doesn't have it, he's going to think it's him, that he's the problem. But if I say up front, look, you're trying to get to know these kids, you're trying to get some biblical truth in, and for them to be able to understand it and have a short discussion, like whatever works. It could be 15 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, depending on the group. But like help him understand what's the win here, and then give him the light at the end of the tunnel that says, now you'll have more of this when they hit 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. Right now, you're just kind of waiting it out. So if I tell him that, then he's going to go in with expectations. In premarital counseling, what we say, happiness is having your expectations met, right? And so if he's expecting that he's only going to get 5-10 minutes of like good conversation, and he gets the upper end of that, he's going to be like, that was a win, that was awesome. And that's going to make him encouraged for the rest of the year. So I think that front end piece where they say, what is my job? What's the win? What do I do to win? And that keeps them from getting discouraged. And I think that lends itself to better retention, and certainly that they'll play out what the commitment time is. We just do commitment for 1 year at a time for our small group leaders, but it's kind of on the understanding that the best thing for students is that you're committing to multiple years, like all the way through middle school or all the way through high school. And we take it 1 year at a time, but that's kind of the way that it works.
Josh, I think that's a great point. And I think when we talk about the recruitment and retention, is not assuming that those current volunteers are coming back the following year.
Right.
And so sitting down with them and talking to them in January, and starting with them, that way you can gauge any needs or potential needs. So if I know that this person is not coming back next year, then I know, okay, I need at least one more, new volunteer to come in and step in. And so, yeah, I think that year to year, even though, as you mentioned, we would communicate it as we would love for this to be ongoing. If you start with 9th graders, we would love for you to see them through their senior year, but treating it as year to year, where each year in the spring, in January, I would sit down with those current volunteers, and I would talk to them about if they foresee themselves coming back.
Yeah. I think one other thing I would say with this, guys, I know we're getting close to running out of time, but it can be very easy as a youth pastor to think of volunteers in a very utilitarian way. And often there's a discipleship moment to be had. Even if a person is dropping out of your youth ministry volunteer team, there's a reason that they're doing that, right? Like, and they're probably going, if they're a thoughtful person, they're probably going to have some kind of sense that they're letting you down. That's often the way it will be. I've really tried over the years not to operate out of a sense of desperation first. So that means I wouldn't say that I'm great at this, but I try, and that is understand that God is the one who cares about the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry and the building up of the body of Christ. And that means your volunteer team is dictated in some way by God. I mean, you got to do some work. You're working along with him, but he's the one who's putting the people in your path.
Yeah.
And that means that we need to be prayerful about who God will put there. And we need to also be trusting in the Lord that he's going to give us the people that we need at the time that we need it. And I think that if we pray, that keeps us from being in a sense of desperation. And the other thing that does is if we're continuing to pray, that prevents us from feeling let down by people when they can't fulfill their obligations. And it keeps us from relationally treating them like, well, you're no good to me anymore, so you've let me down. And your face, your demeanor, the way that you talk, when they give you that info, they're not going to return. I think being able to have a sense of kindness and say, hey, you know what? I've got one guy, he's an excellent small group leader. He's not returning in the fall because they've had a significant family change. They're adopting a number of kids. And of course this guy doesn't have time to continue on. And man, would I want him to feel in any way like he's let me down? Absolutely not. And so what I want to do is let him feel released. Let him know that I'm thankful for the job that he's done. And then invite him to return if he ever does have time again. I think that's a way that we can bless those volunteers, even when they're on the way out the door. There's going to be harder situations than that. Obviously, people are going to drop out for bad reasons. And maybe we can have a whole nother, one, we don't have time for this today, but I know that one question that we would get about this is, I'm a new youth pastor and I have been grandfathered in some pretty not great volunteers. What am I supposed to do about that? Yeah. So maybe a future episode on that issue. But man, there's all kinds of things we could think about volunteer stuff. So hopefully this has been a helpful discussion. One quick rapid fire question for you guys. I'm thinking young youth pastor, doesn't have a lot of money. Maybe they're married. Cheap date night idea. I'll give mine. Coupon. So we just always keep coupons, and the coupons dictate where our date is going to be. And then it's discussion. So it's we go in and we say, let's talk about how life is right now. Give us the top 10. So we're having kind of a strategic discussion about where we are in life with coupons at the date. That's my idea.
Date night. Wow. My wife and I, we enjoy taking walks together, and it don't cost nothing to walks.
That's right.
Walk and talk. It provides opportunities to connect and just talk.
Yeah. I mean, same thing, like walking around the mall or something like that. We like window shopping, and going out like that is always fun, knowing that we're not going to buy anything.
That's great. Hey, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We hope this discussion has been edifying to you. Volunteers are so important. It's so important to have partners in the gospel, and be prayerful about who God's going to bring your way. And again, thank you for joining us at Youth Ministry Unscripted, where we talk real, honest, and raw about gospel-centered youth ministry. And we'll see you next time.